السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كيف حالك؟ بخير.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
How are you guys? I
الحمد
hope
لله.
you're well.
بخير.
Inshallah. Okay, today is Friday. So I want to take a little bit of revision and then we'll go through our Arabic. Then we need to discuss from next week, Monday, what subjects we want to do, what our timings are going to look like. Inshallah. So I need you guys' input on that. So without further ado, let's start. I think let's take some revision on zakah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Umar, tell me what you learned in zakah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very first we started off with the introduction of fiqh. You said there are pieces of evidence which are authentic and some of them are open to interpret it. And we can derive many of the different opinions from it. And we move on to the 5 compulsory things on zakat, that you must be Muslim, and hurriya and nisab.
Hold. So basically what I told you is that a lot of the times the difference in opinion is due to a few things. It's to do with the piece of evidence itself. So you've got that which is clear cut and authentic. You can't interpret it in any other way. So for example, وَأَقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ would mean establish salah. Nobody can come and say now that no, it doesn't mean salah is compulsory. Then you've got pieces of evidence which they may be authentic, but the scholars differ as to interpreting them. Then you've got pieces of evidence where they differ. Are they authentic? Some will say yes, some will say no. Then you've got those where they differ in terms of their authenticity, and after that they also differ as to what exactly is meant. And that's where you find a lot of difference of opinion. And we said that the environment a person grew up in plays a big role in how they think, how they interpret the world, their worldview, etc. Also, people's intelligence is of different levels. Then we said the conditions of zakah. Shaykh Abdul Wahid, how many did we mention? You were not with us at the time. Abdul Wahid, you want to give it a try? Ibrahim.
Yeah. On the conditions, you were saying that when you say the conditions, do you mean the people who are permissible for zakat? Or?
No. So we said that for zakat to be compulsory on any person. So when do we tell a person you must pay zakat, and we tell this person no, you don't pay zakat? There's certain conditions that have to be fulfilled. We said that there's 7 conditions. What we've taken so far. Yes, one of them is nisab. Well, first one start with is Islam. A person should be a Muslim. So we don't.
Muslim.
If non-Muslims are living in an Islamic country, we don't take zakah from them. So that's 1. 2 is in those days there was slavery. So one of the conditions they always say is freedom. A slave was not obliged to pay compulsory zakah. 3, as you mentioned, is nisab. Certain types of wealth, you must reach a threshold. So the $10 in a person's pocket, let's say they only have $10 the whole year, they don't pay zakah on it because they haven't reached nisab. Related to nisab is the fact that this wealth should be owned fully by the person. And they give the example of wealth that may be there, however, there's no 100% owner. And they give examples of a waqf, or usually when in those days, they were slaves. They were slaves when Islam came, and Islam encouraged the people to free their slaves. Those who never want to free, they could agree with the people or the slaves as well as the masters. They would agree that let me buy my freedom. So when the person is paying, there's no zakah on his wealth, the slave's wealth, that is. So that's nisab, the fact that it must be owned fully. And the year should pass. We mentioned the lunar year. We said the Hanafis add that you al-bulugh wal-aql. So a person should be of puberty. So in a child's wealth, even if they inherited $1 billion, according to them, he won't pay zakah because it's not compulsory upon him. And they said a person should be sane, of good mental well-being. So people who have lost their mind, people who are mad, etc. May Allah protect us all. zakah, according to the Hanafis, is not compulsory upon them. What other masail did we take the second day, Ibrahim?
Can I look at the notes or no?
Look at your notes.
The wisdom of zakat.
Sorry, what's that?
The wisdom of zakat,
Okay.
and how zakat is on debt, how to deal with debt and zakat,
Okay.
and the different types of wealth zakat is due on.
Yes. What did we say when it comes to zakah on debt? We said that when people are talking about debt, when they're talking about loans, it's one of two. Either there's a person taking money, or there's a person giving money, a person lending money. We haven't yet taken zakah on the lender. So let's say you've given somebody a long-term loan. You gave him $10 million and you said, pay me after 5 years. Do you carry on paying zakah every year on that money? Is it counted as being yours or not? We haven't yet taken that. We took where a person takes on debt. What did we say they should do, Umar?
Zakatuddin, according to the Hanafi Mazhab, if you have a debt, you don't pay zakat on debt, but if you have the money more than your debt, then you pay zakat on the money beyond the debt, meaning the extra money what you have.
Yeah, so when it comes to debt, you must remember that when you read in the deeper books, then they start categorizing debt. But basically what you could say is Hanafi madhab, if you owing money to people, remember, you could either be debt owing money to people, so you're doing a business deal, or you've got an act of worship like zakah, for example, compulsory upon you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You owe him that wealth. However, he's appointed certain people to collect it from you. Then you've got that type of debt that's only between you and Allah. So for example, kafara. Let's say a person made a nadhr or a promise and they broke their promise. Then when they give that kafara, so those are also debts, but there's nobody who's asking you for that debt. So we said when it comes to the first two categories, according to the Hanafi madhab, if your debt is more than what you have and you haven't reached nisab. So for example, you're holding $1 million in cash, but you're owing 2 million, you won't pay zakah on that because you're owing more than you own and it's not nisab. But let's say you're holding 1.5 million and you owe 1 million, you pay zakah on 500,000. Any other masail we took? Inshallah.
Yeah, on which jewelry you don't pay zakah, meaning except gold and silver. For the jewelry which comes from this.
So not jewelry. Jewelry will take specifically. Remember, in women's jewelry, the Hanafi madhab says women must pay zakah on it, and we'll take it. Inshallah, on Monday, there's few masail I want to take. One of them they call ad-dimar, mal-dimar. Wealth that's lost, and it could be lost physically or it could be lost metaphorically. How is it lost? Let's say, especially in the olden days where you never have a place to keep your wealth safe, people would dig in places, bury it underground. In that ruling also is, let's say you've given somebody a loan, you've given them $1 million, then they refuse, they deny the fact that you ever gave them that money. They say, no, I don't know anything about it. And you find a lot of people like that. You give them something and after a while say, no, you didn't give me. Here, and you've got no bayina, you've got no evidence. What do you do here? As we'll take on Monday, in this instance, you don't pay zakah on it because it's considered lost. What's important to mention, even though it's not related to zakah, but in the Sharia, if you owe somebody money, you must have evidence, you must record the fact that you gave them. If you have no record, according to the legal system, you will have to pay again. So let's say, for example, and it happens a lot, where friends borrow money from each other. I borrowed 100,000 from you. and then or you borrowed 100,000 from me. Okay, you borrow 100,000 from me, then you come after a month and you pay me. We've got no record of it. And then after a little while I say, hey, you know what, that 100,000 you haven't paid me. We start debating and arguing. But because you paid me without any evidence, when you go to the court, they'll tell you no, pay again. So that's why whenever you pay anybody, write it down, make sure they sign, make sure you've got witnesses. If you could have, if you could do going through the bank, make sure you have your transactional records. It's important in today's world. It's important Islamically. That's why the longest verse in the Quran speaks about debt, and Allah encourages us to write who's owed what, and He says, don't be lazy to write that. So inshallah, we'll take that on Monday. Well done. That as well as zakah on a person's money. Let's say he's given out money, he's lended money. Does he pay zakah on that or not? There's one more mas'ala we took. Omar, let me ask you. If,
Yes, sorry.
and inshallah you get a lot of halal wealth, if you got $10 million today, right?
Yeah.
Then tomorrow you go to buy a house worth 5 million. You buy a Bugatti worth 3 million. And you buy another piece of land worth 2 million. So you got 10 million, you spend 5 on a house, 3 on a car, and 2 on land. When do you pay zakah?
5.5. I pay zakah if my property is making money for me. If I have rented my house, for example,
No, you've bought it. You've bought it for yourself. You have no intention of doing business on it.
Then I don't pay zakah on any of the things.
You don't pay zakah. Yes. Yeah. Why? Because that's for your personal use. So things that you are using for your personal use, and that includes people who have factories, machinery. Sometimes that machinery is worth millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. According to the majority of scholars, you don't pay zakah on that. Yes, there's a few people today who say you must pay zakah on it, but Wallahu a'lam, the evidence points to a person not paying zakah on those pieces of machinery, tools, your cars that are for personal use, your houses, etc. Let me ask you a question. Abdul Wahid, if you own a hotel, okay? Let's say you own a hotel in Santon, the expensive area, and that hotel is worth 10 million. What do you pay zakat on and what don't you pay zakat on?
I think I would pay zakat on the excess revenue I would make on the minus expenses.
Yes, so
I wouldn't pay on the asset. Yes,
so on the actual building, you won't pay on it. However, you're collecting literally rental room fees. As long as it's more than nisab, after, as you mentioned, after taking out all your expenses, etc., then you would pay zakah on that. Okay, let me ask you another question. Ibrahim, you in America, and you see a cheap piece of land, big, it's an estate. You buy this piece of land, and your intention is to go into housing development. So you say, okay, I'm going to build 100 houses and I'm going to sell them. At the end of the year, let's say you sold 50 during the year. So you built 100 houses, you sold 50, you're remaining with 50. How do you calculate your zakah?
You take into account the profit. So it's like the 50 you take account, and then since the other 50 houses are like your merchandise, so you'd have to pay zakat on all of them.
Okay, so when you mean profit, what exactly are you talking about?
The profit is like income minus expenses. So like the expenses you have, you pay the contractor, pay the real estate agent, all that stuff, and then the money that's the excess money that's left to us is that, and also the other houses that you intend to sell, because
You'll count them as your inventory example, because
Yeah.
now you've become a person who's dealing in houses.
yes,
So the first ones you sold, now let's say we said 100 houses. You sold 50 of them, 1 million each. So that's $50 million. With that $50 million, let's say you bought yourself a large estate, a big farm worth $50 million. Okay. So you
can you repeat
Pardon?
it? You're it got like cut
Okay.
off.
I said you got 50 houses that you've sold. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You've got 50 houses that you sold for 50 million. The next day you go and buy a large farm for 50 million. You put all that money into a farm. The other 50 houses we agreed, you calculate that as zakah on inventory. On this farm, do you pay zakah or you don't pay zakah? So advanced, we haven't taken it, but I want to see if you guys know.
You'd pay zakat if on the cattle, and then related to your crops that you grow. And you also pay zakat on that if you reach the nisab related.
So what you mean to say is, let's look at what is this person farming. That's what you're trying to say?
Yes.
There's certain things you pay zakah on when it comes to foodstuffs, and there's certain things you pay zakah on when it comes to livestock. Why I'm taking this now, so you have a slight introduction for next week. We first look at the type of wealth. So if you've got somebody who is who's taken cows and he's keeping them in order to reproduce and to form milk, etc., and he's got so many, then we would say that, okay, now because you've taken it for this and this reason, you pay, we'll calculate your zakah, and you'll take how to calculate zakah on cows. And let's say he's growing foodstuffs, vegetables, seeds. Here, when it comes to foodstuffs, the scholars amongst themselves, they differ as to what do you pay zakah on? Do you pay zakah on a vegetable or you don't? Do you only pay zakah on food stuff that can last for the year or not? What do you pay zakah on? And inshallah, we'll take it madhab by madhab. Okay, what happens now if that farm that you bought, you go and rent half of it to another farmer? Okay, are you with me? Okay, who's
I'm with you.
you're with? So the farm you bought for 50 million, you took half the land, and you're doing your livestock and you're doing your crops. The other half you saw Umar, and you told him, come here, I'll give you this piece of land. Do you pay zakah on it or you don't? Who pays zakah on that piece of land?
He pays zakah on whatever he grows as a crop, and I'll pay zakah on the rent which I'm collecting from him.
What if they go into an investment deal or into a partnership where this guy says, no, I'll give you the land, you do the work, and then from the revenue we'll see, or from the crop, we'll see how to share it. Let's say they say half.
Isn't that a waqf?
No. So waqf, you must remember, waqf is where you've given it to literally to Allah. Said, oh Allah, I've taken out this asset, this piece of land, this building, this whatever it may be, an asset that can remain. I've given it for your sake. So here we're talking about, if let's say you have a farm, you don't have the time to go and grow the crops, you don't have the time to water it, you don't have the time to do anything. You find Abdul Wahid, who mashallah knows about farming, but let's say he doesn't have the capital. So you tell him, come and work on my farm, whatever you grow, then we share it. It comes later on in Kitab al-Buyu'. The question arises is that who will pay zakah, how much zakah will they pay, etc. Inshallah, we'll take that. This is only just to pick your guys' brains. Any questions on what we've taken before we move on next? Anything on zakah? Who was here when they asked about taking out zakah on shares and stocks?
I was there that time
Yes,
Were they,
I was there.
last year.
last year sometime? What did we say?
I think we divided the shares into those shares that we're buying primarily for dividends. So we're holding
Yes.
them long term, and we bought them primarily for the dividends. Then we just pay zakat on the dividends revenue. And then there was those stocks that we're buying to trade. So then we pay on the value of the stock on that day. We're working on zakat, if I remember correctly.
Yes, correct. So we said those who are buying like to hold, but they're getting dividends. We could say that it's similar to somebody who's bought a building and collecting rentals. So you would pay on those dividends. Another thing when it comes to stock, as you take in Kitab al-Buyur later on, yes, when you learn in the book, they tell you, okay, the companies are 3 types: those which are clean, they don't deal in interest and that, and whatever products they sell are clean. Then you've got those who the products are clean. It might be a cement company, but they deal in interest. And then you've got those which their products are haram and they deal in haram. That's when you learn it in the books. However, when you look at it on the ground, and I'm talking about stocks that you trade, stocks in the market, etc. It's very hard to take that type of idealist 3 categories and put it on. Example, your Fortune 500 companies, things like that. So it's very difficult. Inshallah, when we get to that, we'll speak about it. Bismillah.
Sorry, Sheikh, I have one question. You've got a farmer.
Yeah.
And he produces crop.
Okay.
Or he's got cows, okay? So let's say he meets the requirements to give zakat on his livestock.
Okay.
But then after a while, when it comes to his income, his financial income, he doesn't meet the nisab amount. And he asks, can he be zakatable? And that same
Yes,
person be zakatable?
Yes, on his cows. So let's say he's got, let's say somebody's got 1,000 cows, but they don't have any money. Let's for argument's sake say the nisab of zakah is 10,000. Let's say this guy at the end of the year only got 5,000, and he's remember, you're going to take conditions for zakah to be compulsory on livestock when it comes to, do they graze or do you feed them? Do they graze on the grass that's out there, or are you feeding them? There's all those conditions, so you have to look at them. What's he taken it for? Sometimes what happens is people have taken zakah, or people have taken livestock not in order to use it for milk, or in order to use, they just want to buy and sell. They've now taken it as a commodity. They're not really farming them. So here they would change, we would count their cows, etc., as stock, the same way you would count a business's stock. So we've got to look at that. But what you could say is that this person would be zakatable. I mean, let's say he's farming cows, the fact that he wants to make them increase, etc. He's got 1,000 cows, but he's only got 5,000 in his pocket. He would pay zakah if he meets the other conditions.
Sorry, what I was trying to say was that, okay, let me use example here in Zimbabwe, right?
Okay.
You've got a guy who plants a bit of maize.
Okay.
So when his crop is harvested, firstly, would he have to pay? He would have to give some of his crop. He would give the crop as zakat, isn't it? Some portion of the crop as zakat.
Yes, but you're going to look at quantities also. A lot of these small scale farmers won't fulfill your threshold there.
What's the threshold like?
You take it, but as far as I can remember, is 300 sa'as. So what's a sa'? No,
as a hand, is that like a handful?
60. Well, what's 60 by 5? 6 by 5 is 300. Yes. So one sa' is made of 4 handfuls of grain. That's one sa'. So if you are looking at 300 sa'as times by 4, that's 1,200 handfuls of grain. Then, so after he's taken out his corn or his dates or his wheat or whatever he's farming, does he reach that threshold or he doesn't? Then you look at how was he farming that? Was he using well water, rainwater? Did he dig his borehole? If he's put a machine in order to get water, his threshold would go down. If it's half and half. So there's a lot of conditions that, especially when it comes to farming, especially when it comes to that. Inshallah,
So if that person, let's say he can still come to you after 6 months and say he needs, let's say he needs assistance. That same person needs assistance. He sold his maize and then he doesn't have money. Maybe after 3 months he's used the money, and now he doesn't meet the nisab amount in terms of income. So we can still give that person zakat funds. It's still applicable.
Yes, it goes back to the point that, do we consider everybody who owns nisab to be zakatable or not? So now you find some people, some scholars who mention that as long as the guy owns nisab, he's not considered a poor person because he has to pay zakah, hence he can't take zakah. So they'll say, okay, this guy has 10,000, for example. And some of them will say the nisab is much less. The problem arises where, I'm going to give you about 3 masail, so you'll build. The problem arises where we're using paper money today. What is the nisab? If you go with silver, you come into about $200, $300 roughly. If you go with gold, you come into about $10,000 maybe. Okay, look at that big difference. From 200, you're going how many times up? So is a person, in our terms today, can we say that if we're going with silver, a person who has $200, can we consider them a rich man? And on top of it, say they own nisab, and on top of it, say they must pay zakah, and on top of it, say, according to this opinion, that because they own nisab, you can't give them zakah, you won't be able to pay zakah to anybody. Now, there's another opinion that says that what's a faqir? What's a poor person? Somebody who doesn't have enough. Remember, the Hanafis differ with the rest as to the difference between faqir and miskin. Why? Because Allah says in the ayah, those who are deserving of zakah, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. Some of them say fuqara, faqir is somebody who has nothing. And they say miskin is somebody who has a little bit but not enough. The second opinion is they change them opposite. So they say this one has but not enough, and this one doesn't have it all. Whatever opinion you take, we reach, they say that when you're giving them that zakah, you can give them for what's enough for the year. So in terms of we could say basic necessities. Let's say somebody, he had his maize, he sold his maize. He may still be zakatable. He may have a phone, he may have a laptop, he may have a car, he may have a house. And you may still need to give him zakah because he can't get through with all his expenses. He can't pay, let's say, rental on his house, even though he's living in one. Do we tell him, leave your house now, don't pay rental? Do we tell him, take your children out of school? Do we tell him, go cut down to eating only 1 meal a day? Example, we can't. So what I'm trying to get at is, you might find a person who owns nisab, but you're still able to give them zakah. And then you get to another question, is that some of these guys, if you give them, let's say for the whole year one time, they'll squander that money. So here you can drip feed them their zakah. So every month you give them a little bit. And then what happens also here, especially where there's poverty, if you give a lot of the times the male member of the family that money, they'll go and a lot of them end up drinking alcohol. They don't look after their families. So in this case, a lot of scholars say you ask them, or you see what they're in need of. They're in need of food, they're in need of cooking oil, they're in need of things like that. So here, instead of giving them the money because you know they'll squander it, you end up giving them food stuff, you end up giving them hampers, and that's how a lot of these charities operate. Because the people are in need of the food, they need of that hamper, use that zakah to get it. Ibrahim, you were saying?
So what's the difference between a fakir and a miskin?
So the Hanafis have a definition, and Jumhur, the other scholars, have an opinion, and this will come towards the end of what we're taking so far. It's called the people who are deserving of zakah, based on the ayah, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. And inshallah, we'll take that there. Also, when it comes to al-gharimin, people who are in debt, does it mean that everybody who now says, let's say we're in a community here, and somebody took 10 million and they lost it, and then somebody else took 20 million and they lost it, and somebody else, the whole community's zakah, if these people, you say you can give them zakah, the fact that they squandered money, what's going to be left for the poor people? What's going to be left for everybody else? We're bailing out. What happens a lot of the times is rich people who are owed money, they say, okay, I'll give this guy zakah so he can pay me back. It happens a lot. And that shouldn't be the case. So all that, inshallah, Ibrahim, you take it from there. Ahlul Zakah, you take it from there. In Ramadan, we have to give money since it's mandatory. Also, that you take towards the end of this chapter, and we'll take it slowly, slowly. If you take everything now, you guys will have a fruit salad. It's called Sadaqatul Fitr or Zakatul Fitr. Sadaqatul Fitr or Zakatul Fitr, most of the scholars, they say you must give it as grain, as the hadith says, either wheat, barley, dates, etc. Some go a step further and they say, okay, that could mean the staple food of the land. So here we got maize, for example. And the Hanafi madhab has an opinion, you give what's more beneficial to the poor person, and that would or they allow you to give it in money also. So you give the guy whatever its equivalent is. And that was the opinion of some of the tabi'een. And at times what happens is you may take by an opinion, but, and this is my view as well as a lot of other people's view in terms of fiqh. And it doesn't mean you have to follow my opinion, no. But I'm telling you so you understand. You may take an opinion, you may believe in an opinion, but the circumstance you may be in, you may need to take by another opinion that you may not see as the most correct. I'll give you an example. When COVID came, people couldn't go out to give Sadaqatul Fitr or Zakatul Fitr, or what they call Fitra in Ramadan. They couldn't go out to give it in grain. What did they do? You had to give it as money to whoever the people were, or whoever the organizations were, etc. And those organizations, at times, they themselves couldn't go out and give foodstuffs. They had to give money. They had to transfer to people. Yeah, so fiqh is such that it's not rigid, and that's Islam. It's not rigid such that you've got mashaqqa, you end up suffering, and nor is it such where you break all the principles. There's principles that you abide by, and there's certain places where you can have your ijtihad, and hence from there you get subjects, for example, called al-maqasid. In maqasid, you're learning what did the Sharia intend. So people try to derive the wisdom behind the ruling. What's intended by this ruling? And if we can know why this ruling was, then maybe we can also apply it to another ruling to say, okay, for example, the Sharia wants us to come together, to live together, etc. Hence, other rulings, for example, let's say, I don't have one off my head, but inshallah, when I get one, I'll mention. Nonetheless, what I'm getting to is at times you look at what does the Sharia want us to do, and it's a fine balance between being very rigid and being completely somebody who's just taken by anything. So it's in the middle somewhere. And again, it depends on people's interpretation, people's intelligence, etc. Okay, some scholars said it's okay to pray online with the imam. Others said we can't. The problem with online is there's always a lag. So, for example, if you look at the TV, generally you could be anywhere from half a minute to a minute to 2 minutes behind. Why? That camera that's taking the live has to then broadcast it to the satellite and come back. So generally you're always delayed. So hence you won't be able to follow salah from the TV or the internet. That's one reason. The imam might be in sajda and you're still hearing him saying walad dallin. Two is that if you're far away, you won't be able to, because there's no saf between you and him. There's so many obstacles. What happens at times, let's say you're in Makkah or you're in Medina, and you can see the sufuf in front of you in the courtyard and you're in one of the high buildings, then inshallah there's no harm in reading in the musallas that are around the haram. Any questions on this before we start here?
I've just got a quick question, sorry.
Yeah.
On the issue of zakat.
Yeah.
What advice, practically, sometimes we face a challenge where, how can I put it without being abrupt? But sometimes we face challenges where it seems like a certain personality, or I won't use it this way, zakat becomes like a drug. People just rely on zakat money. So let's say they're able to work, but they know that they're zakatable, so you're going to give them every month for their rent, etc. How do you advise? I know they are zakatable, we're not arguing about that. But how would you advise us?
We could argue if they're zakatable or not. The fact that the person is able to work, he's able to go out, and he's just sitting lazy. That's why there's a few ahadith where people came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking him, and then he told them, there's no share for a person who is strong and able to earn in this zakah. There's no share for him. Another thing is that when a person asks and asks and asks, then there's other ahadith that mention some of the punishments. Anyway, those are punishments in the akhirah. But in the dunya, we could argue that, look, no, this person must go and work. And if you don't want to give him your zakah, you won't have to give him. Let's say there's somebody else who's more befitting. Remember, it's very difficult for one person's zakah who wants to give zakah, say, okay, but if I don't give this guy, I won't be able to give anybody else. No, you'll be able to give them. That's why there's some people, I would differ with you on that point, that we could debate the fact that are they zakatable or not. Anyway, you were saying, but let's go with what you're saying. So you're coming to the fact that what's the practical solution for them?
What the practical solution? Because sometimes they're senior people.
Yes.
And then, it's difficult, but sometimes you feel that you're spoiling them, in your heart, you feel that by, I don't know how to say it, but you feel like you're not doing them, by you just giving them the zakat, they're never going to really get and do something,
Okay, so let's, again, what I'm going to tell you is what I think and my opinion. Don't take it as saying it might be a mistake, but okay, let's say people who are senior, who can't really work, who are weak, etc. Or let's say they're earning, but they fall into the category where it's not enough for them. Here you can give them. But let's say they're youngsters, people who've come out of university, people who are saying we're looking for jobs. The problem we find is a lot of people they feel they're entitled to a certain position or a certain pay, and if they don't get it, they can sit at home and get zakah. Personally, I would say that maybe if they're starting off, help them once, twice, but after that, don't give them, because as you mentioned, you're only going to spoil them. Or what you can do is that you can tell them that I don't believe that, especially if you know them. You say, not zakah. Some people ask you directly, I'm now zakatable. No, say, I'll give you this as sadaqah, I'll give you this as a small thing, but practically it's better for you to not give them and encourage them to do something. If you're able to find them a job elsewhere, find it for them. But I know those are the type of people who give the most headache. May Allah protect us.
Exactly. And on that point, like what they'll do, they'll come and they'll say, young guys, they'll say, okay, can you give us a lump sum?
Yes.
So we can do
we
project.
can start a project. Yes.
And then what happens after a year, that project has failed most of the time.
Yes.
And then it's basically a cycle, but it's like when you hear this story, it's not like, things happen, this happened, maybe they weren't experienced enough,
Yeah.
some mitigating circumstances, not entirely their fault, those the economy, this played out, this played out. And then they'll come back maybe after another year and say, look, we've got another project. It's quite tricky, we face these
It's
situations.
everywhere.
And
It's
sometimes we don't know what to do.
Yeah. No, you try your best. You ask Allah to guide you, and at times, as Allah says in the Quran, وما تنفقوا من خير فلأنفسكم وما تنفقون إلا ابتغاء وجه الله يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف تعرفهم بسيماهم لا يسألون الناس إلحافا. Speaking about those who you give and in a hadith it's mentioned that the true poor people are not those who go from door to door literally doing tawaf asking. No, the true poor people are those who don't ask, but you can see from the circumstances that, hey, this guy is in need, this guy is eligible for zakah, this guy is going through a rough patch. So that's actually an ayah in the Quran as well as the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, is that a poor person is not that one who goes from door to door asking, hey, I'm zakatable, hey, give me. Generally, you find the poor people and those who are sincere, you can see the suffering, you can see the strife, and it's you as the person giving that zakah, you try to give the person who's most deserving. You'll be rewarded for that. Inshallah. Yallah, let's carry on with this. I think we had taken this. لماذا اختارت الشمس? Yeah, we took that. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We get to this exercise. These again are more writing exercises. They're telling you صل بين المفرد والجمع. Mufrad is singular, jam' is plural. So they're also teaching you how to make singular and how to make plural. Sheikh Umar, اقرأ, read here and find the jam'. Jam' is plural.
صحيفة صحف.
Excellent. What's صحيفة?
Sahifa is newspaper and suhufun meaning newspapers.
Means? Yeah, papers, newspapers.
Newspapers.
Next one, Omar from India.
رحلة رحلات.
Excellent. Next one, Omar, also.
طابع meaning stamp and طوابع meaning stamps.
The last one.
Kitabun means one book. Kutubun meaning multiple books, so many books.
And so what you learn now slowly, even though they're not teaching to you directly, but indirectly, you'll find that, as I told you in Sarf, is certain weights, certain awzan that you make a plural from. So one of them is, like example, kitabun, it's ala wazni fi'alun. You take out this alif and it will just become kutubun. Can you see? Sahifatun suhufun. Now, generally, when a word is feminine and you've got this ta marbuta that's here, you could drop the ta marbuta and just add an alif and a ta, and you're generally going to have your plural. Here they've got sahifatun suhufun, and at times there's more than one way to say plural. Like look at rihlatun, they got rihlatun. And then another way is taba', they've got tawabi'. Slowly you pick up these and then it will become second nature to you, inshallah. Here they want you to find the kalimatul ghariba. Kalima ghariba is, so they've given you a group of words that all belong or related to each other. They're saying take the odd one out. Abdul Wahid, number one.
It will be al-fakiha.
Al-fakiha. Well, al-fakiha is a fruit and the rest are all sports.
All
Next
sports
one.
activity.
Next one, Umar.
الصباحة.
لا وين صباح يا شيخ؟ عمر المدني. بيت كتاب مجلة وصحيفة.
I didn't understand the question.
The question, they're saying that you've got a group of items. So for example, if you've got a notebook, and you've got a book in fiqh, for example, and you've got an e-book, and then you've got this glass of water. As you can see, the odd one out is the glass of water because all the other things are books. So first one, Kuratul Qadam is a sport, Sibaha is a sport, Furusiya is a sport, Fakiha is your fruit, that's the odd one out. So here, Bayt Kitab Majalla Sahifa, the odd one out would be Bayt, a house. All these others are to do with paper and books. Last one, Umar from India.
I find it one.
القراءة.
قراءة مراسلة التدبير المنزلي. عبد الواحد, which one? Al-Hafila, the bus. So you guys, inshallah, will discuss your lesson. I want to stop here because the others are not here, and I want to discuss with you guys what to take and what time to take those lessons. So inshallah, we'll stop here. The